Hello and welcome to day 7 of Divine Intervention, 365 days of world building. Today we're going to today starts the next few days of talking about the Pact of Awe. And the Pact of Awe is when all 6 nations came together and decided on a treaty where they were going to let the borders lie where they are for the most part, and everyone would get along and be all nice. So, how did they come about that? Well, today we're going to start with just about the idea of it and how it was executed and kind of touch base on why it was there. So, at the end of the War of Magic, the Aystryl nation came together on one kingdom. And it was decided that to benefit the entire kingdom, that the greatest mages and wizards and warlocks and everything would come together and work on like a single cause. And then that was the only way to really justify having this union. It was for like the greater good and the greater knowledge of the entire nation. And so what they undertook and what they decided to do was build a capital that would basically act as a conduit for concentration of Vesper essence. And they went through rituals and all kinds of stuff and decided on this design. And they had spent a lot of resources, at like the cost of a lot of funding, getting stonework from the Hoarfrost Nation, all these other people, any way they could to build the capital. And if you can kind of take a look at this, let's see, we'll look at it from this point of view. So you have the center of the conduit, and then you have 6 main chambers around it. And then around those you have 6 outer chambers. And then at a distance you have 6 chambers. And all of these kind of condense the Vesper essence into the center of this. Here, let me see if I can. So you can kind of see the planes a little bit better this way. Whoop. So this was the old capital. And so what happened was, when it was built, it didn't really work. So the king who was there, they finally had all this stuff built. Each of these towers represented one of the 6 different major Vesper essence. And you had each of them ruled by a different guy. And you had these 7 kingdoms underneath this one rule. And this was the main like capital of the Aystryl nation. And you had Luxuria, Gula, Serbia, Vangoria, and Averta and Ira. And they each had a different focus. And the Aystryl nation, well, like I said, when we start doing those nations and stuff, we'll learn more about them. But they, because of their knowledge and their like drive for magic, can kind of tap into the magics of the other nations and the other Vespers. So each one of these was like a school on a different Vesper. But like I said, it didn't work. So they kind of gave up on this idea, and they started kind of just getting into like a feudal system for a long time. And so you had this just giant arc of basically peace in the Aystryl nation, and it was just like a general like age of knowledge until about here. So what happened here was basically recalculations were done, and a small sect of people came together and they said, 1, you guys built it in the wrong place, and 2, you didn't build it big enough. And most importantly, you guys don't believe in the other like 5 gods. So why would, like, we can't, even though you have these schools of magic where like you're teaching, you know, green Vesper and life, and you're like good at it, you don't have like the full worship at that at that settlement, at that city, at that like smaller kingdom, and you mess this up. Like, so we gotta like move it to where it's supposed to be. We gotta build it bigger on like a gigantic scale. Like, you guys messed up everything about this, and nobody liked that. Everyone was just like, no, shut up, you're an idiot. So what happened was that sect ended up having to gather like a following, and they overthrew the current regime and took over the kingdom. And then after they took over the kingdom, what they had decided and what they came upon for their plan was that the only way to succeed, to get this conduit working, was to convince the other nations to join in on them. And the idea of the treaty was made not so much for a treaty, but as a way to get the 6 nations in this localized area and build everything they needed built. So what they did was they ended up building Lunarium here, and you had the inner circle, you had the center, you had the inner circle, you had the outer inner circle, you had the 6 towers of the gods, and then you had an outer rim of the 6 nations. So you had the Tower of Aystryl, Tower of Awe, which was the green, Tower of Fajit, Tower of the Unseen, Tower of Zars, Tower of Fog and Fin. And you had the Tower of Stone, the Tower of Life. You had Luxuria, which was their you have Gula, sorry. Gula became their outer ring. You had the Tower of Flame. You had the Tower of Death. And then you had the Tower of Fluid, which is now underwater. And so what they did was they basically they made a pact with the Wanderers of the Unseen. And they said, hey, you go and you travel to every nation. We want to make a treaty between all the nations. And what we want you to do is we want you to tell everybody, like, we should all get on this. We should become civilized. It's going to help everybody out. We'll be able to share and trade. It's going to be awesome. And what we need is everybody to gather, like, their leaders together and, like, meet. And we'll have, like, a council. And we'll come to terms. And everyone will sign it. And that's how they convinced 5 nations to not only show up to help concentrate and gather that Vesper essence where they needed it, but to also give them supplies to build it. So yeah, tomorrow what we're going to do is we'll talk a little more about the conduit and exactly what went into these stages, and why they are the way they are, or how they were explained to the other nations. Because this is all built to scale for a reason. So, all right. Thanks for joining us.